Welcome to our second virtual annual shareholder meeting. This time, however, we're doing both. We're doing a virtual annual shareholder meeting plus an owner's celebration this weekend. Now we're no longer subject to the restrictions. We've got a full experience here at the winery. I wanted to just tell you that I've had a lot of help putting this on. Dana Fritsch, who is our administrative coordinator. Many of you have contact with the winery regarding questions regarding your ownership in the company. She's the one who leads that part of our operation. And of course, many of you know Taylor Herman, who is our club and owner coordinator. Many have contact with her. She's actually helping today too. Chris Jolie is the head of our IT department. He's making sure all this IT works. I've got a lot of people to thank. Not only do Taylor Herman to thank, but she's actually going to be answering questions that she can answer in the Q&A that's in the bottom part of your screen. You can actually ask questions by typing them in the Q&A part of the screen, and she will answer, as well as Mandy Morgan, who is the head of our marketing and communications. So they'll be doing that for you, and then they'll leave questions for me to answer at the end of this presentation that they think should be heard by. The answer should be questions and answers should be heard by all of you. You know, there's two groups of owners in this call, in this Zoom. And one, of course, is our common stock holders who have the voting rights to vote on their proxy ballots. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of be a little bit of a spoiler here of the results. The reason for that is if we do lose internet connection, I want to make sure we get the formal official part of our annual meeting covered. We do have a majority of votes cast in favor of both items on the proxy ballot, both for the election for 3-year terms of our 2 board members, as well as the ratification of our auditors. So if for any reason there's a technological reason why we would lose Wi-Fi, at least we will have been able to meet the legal requirements of our annual meeting. But we're going to have Craig Smith, who is the secretary of the board of directors, present the official results at the latter part of this presentation. Now, you're going to hear from me. I'm going to give you an overview of what the company's strategy is and how we're working toward achieving that strategy. But you'll also hear from Christine Clare, who's our winery director. You'll hear from John Ferry, our CFO. And then he'll of course, introduce Moss Adams, just so you know who the person is, who is leading up the audit efforts, the independent audit efforts of our company's financials. And then, of course, Craig Smith. You know, it has been quite a year. And oddly enough, because of the remarkable nature of our company, both our ownership as well as our employees, we actually had our best year in our history, selling over 180,000 cases of wine. Now here in this picture, you'll see us standing, you know, out in front of the vineyard back in 1988 at our groundbreaking. That's 33 years ago. And I think if you had talked to me at this time when we were having that picture taken with our shovels for our groundbreaking, and you'd asked me how much wine we'd ever make here at the winery, I would have never guessed. But when we set a goal together in this gathering of building a world-class winery in Oregon, together we certainly have done that. And of course, we're earning that every day. And as you look at that picture, you'll see, for example, there's Don Voorhees, who has now passed, but he was my co-founder. Don Voorhees, you'll see his family members who are also still owners of the company surrounding him in this picture. You'll see people like there's Stan Terrell smiling, you know, in this photograph, and Stan, as you know, is still serving on our board of directors. And Jim and Debbie Ellis, you'll see there, Jim is still serving on our board of directors. There they were at our very beginning with a dream. And of course, there you'll see Dick and Betty O'Brien. You know, Dick and Betty, as you know, planted the Vineyard Elton in the same year as we planted this vineyard in 1983. So it's been a collective effort. And one of the things that was important to us was not just making world-class, cool climate varieties like Pinot Noir, but it was also important to us that we did it the right way, that we practice the farming techniques of sustainability, that we made our wine in the same way, and we treated our neighbors with respect. We treated each other with respect. And that's how we've conducted ourselves. And you know that stewardship lies at the heart of our purpose in growing our grapes and making our wine and serving our communities. And I think we do that well, in part because we are community owned, just like this picture represents. Now, you know, for example, that we've led an effort nationwide to encourage consumers to choose natural cork as enclosures, because those cork forests in the Mediterranean are second only to the Amazon in their importance to the world's biosphere, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, pumping oxygen into the atmosphere. And we as wine enthusiasts can do a simple thing, and that is use a corkscrew to help protect our environment. And I think we're reminded more of the importance of this as we're dealing with these climatic changes. So you can see in this picture, one of the new innovations that we're bringing to our industry worldwide. That is a picture of a UVC robot. In fact, it's on display here just outside this office for the owners to see this weekend. This is the first autonomous robot that carries UVC lights to kill powdery mildew at night. And that's a fairly recent discovery, that UVC light will kill powdery mildew, but only at night when their repair mechanisms in their genes are turned off, because they're not afraid of the sun at night. And that's how we do it. And here in this picture, there's David Markell, one of our employees and owners. And he's got the USDA leader from Corvallis next to him, and then a student, a graduate student at Oregon State University, all working on this project to see if we can teach others the importance of using a fully sustainable means. So we don't have to use organic sulfur to kill powdery mildew. And many farmers, if we could teach them, they won't have to use fungicides, certainly to the degree they're using now. Over 100 million pounds of fungicides are used by agriculture each year in the United States, 100 million pounds. And that's to kill powdery mildew. And we know that we're learning a lot more about the connection between human health issues like dementia and Alzheimer's and others, and chemicals used in agriculture. And so we're trying to make sure we maintain and lead in stewardship, representing you and really doing something of importance long term with our ownership in Willamette Valley Vineyards. You know, here in this picture, Jan and I are in Dick and Betty O'Brien's garden. This is right next to Elton Vineyard. And this picture just reminds you, there's Jan. As you know, I'm sitting actually in the wine library in my office, which is just next to the wine library. You see the Verno block vines planted behind me. That was my very first 15-acre planting back in 1983. And, you know, she was the one actually who designed and built this office for me. And she is responsible now for leading the construction efforts at the Verno Estate Vineyard, building the Method Champenoise Sparkling Winery, which we hope to have open in May of next year. But this just picture reminds us, I think, all of us, about how wine does something more than just please us with our meals. It also is a place where it brings us together. I met Jan at a wine tasting in Seattle. And so I owe a lot to wine and a lot to her. Now, here are our board of directors. You'll see there is Craig Smith. Many of you may know him from his reputation in Oregon. You know, he was retired as vice president, as chief financial officer for Chemeketa Community College, responsible for their remarkable growth over the many years. But he's unusual in Oregon is that he's both been a member of the Oregon State Bar as well as a CPA. And of course, that's really handy on our board of directors. And many people don't know this, but he was actually a law enforcement officer before I met him when attending Willamette Graduate School back, oh my gosh, that's a long time ago. And then next to Craig, you see Leslie Copeland. She's fairly new to our board, but she was the vice president of an international organization in human resource and human development, and has specialized in leadership, coaching, executive coaching over many years. She's the head of the committee that deals with compensation. Sean Carey, many of you remember, was the CFO here. He actually earned his master's degree while working here from University of Oregon. Prior to that time, I got to see a picture of him where he received his diploma and congratulations from the President of the United States when he graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy, later going to work in the Pentagon. And then Jim Ellis, many of you probably know that he was our HR director for many, many years before retiring. He serves as the company's ombudsman still, is on our board of directors. He was in that picture with Debbie at our beginning. And I don't know how many of you know, but he used to be many years ago an administrator for Christian Brothers in California. And then Stan Terrell, who has been with us, from the beginning of our board of directors. Very accomplished, having built a substantial accounting, basically quite an empire of accounting firms before he sold them to a French publicly held company. And then he's gone on to start, cable television, and he's really quite an entrepreneur. He's got a great deal of real estate, and he's been very helpful to us in making decisions that relate to those issues, just as the other board members. And we have some incredible alum from our board, like Chris Sarles and Betty O'Brien, who continue to advise us. So I'm very grateful for that. Now, amongst all of our employees and our volunteers, we have extraordinary, outstanding performance in each year, and it's sometimes hard to decide who to choose. But I want to show you what the choices are for our Bacchus Awards for this year. Here in this picture, you'll see, and this is probably of a surprise to everybody, but there's Vern Egeman. Vern is our Volunteer of the Year, who, think about the year we've been through and how he was there at any moment that we needed for any task. And of course, as you know, our organization started with a remarkable level of volunteerism. We ran our bottling line for over 25 years, mostly with shareholder volunteers. Our festivals, our tasting rooms, we had it in our first opening day. We had the help of our volunteers, shareholders, staffing the tables. In fact, I think in that year, we had over 350 shareholders at their own expense take the Oregon Liquor Control Commission class to get a service permit. So that is really part of our DNA, is the involvement of our owners in growing our business and really celebrating their ownership. And then, of course, our Employee of the Year, Bacchus Award winner. Here you'll see, and here it is. People don't know this, but it's Spence Fogarty. You'll find him upstairs. He's our state general manager. And it wasn't easy choosing amongst all of the extraordinary leaders we have in our business. But in this particular case, I want you to think about what Spence needed to do to inspire his employees during the time of shutdowns and reopenings and shutdowns, and how he was able to make sure he continued to drive our revenues forward. As you know, we had our highest revenue year ever. I remember Spence reporting to me how many packages he was shipping out. In fact, he had to convert part of our tasting room into a shipping center to handle the volume that especially our owners and club members were ordering. So I thank you all for that. So if you can, they can't hear you applaud, but if you've got a coffee cup you can lift in their honor or applaud, please do. And when you see either Vern or Spence, please thank them for the remarkable service that they have given us. This next slide just reminds me of, it's just a reminder of how much fun we have growing our business. There you can see right in the middle of this picture, there's some owners and employees there in our cellar. We do a lot of these cellar activities, and that's Rich Gower. He's our former retired CFO, so you may remember him in presenting from years past. He's an owner, and you can see that you can almost hear the laugh in the cellar, his laugh in the cellar. And it's just a reminder of the unique nature of our business. He still continues to advise us, even though he's retired. In fact, one of the things the board of directors did to thank the employees for the performance during the pandemic is that the board of directors made a small grant of preferred stock to every employee of the company. And so I hope they're on this call with us because we are community owned, we're wine enthusiast owned, were employee owned. And I think that is an organization that is organized in a way, or structured in a way that's to best serve the publics it serves. You know, here, this is a couple of our growers in Southern Oregon in this next image, that how we started, we expanded outside of Willamette Valley Vineyards, growing cool climate Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Riesling. We expanded, and back in 1996, we entered into an arrangement with Don and Trouty Moore, growers in Southern Oregon, living in above a town called Talent, up in the hills. They had these small vineyards that they grew into a remarkable organization. And of course, we started a brand with them called Griffin Creek. And that was our very first venture of starting to tell the Oregon story more broadly than just the Willamette Valley and its growing conditions. And I think it's turned out to be very popular. We saw, I think, something like 4,000 cases a year right out our front door. Much of that to our owners. Wines that like Cabernet Franc, for example, warmer climate grapes, Merlot. And Don and Trouty Moore became owners in our company and have been invaluable with their son now, Michael, running their business, Quail Run Vineyards, and their organization. I think put them in your thoughts because they're having a very challenging year. As you know, they had smoke issues in several vintages past, and now they have serious water issues. So I'm asking you to put, if you would, to put the growers of the Rogue Valley in your thoughts and prayers, because they're very challenged right now because they're losing their water supply. Many of those vineyards rely upon irrigation, and that's very iffy right now. We're lucky here that in the Willamette Valley we have so many vineyards that are that don't face those kinds of issues. You know, over the years, as we've grown our organization, Christine Clare, our winery director, and I worked together on what we called Oregon Estate Vineyards. We co-founded that initiative. And so you can see here the vineyards that we now own on this map. So you can see in the Willamette Valley AVA, if you start down at the middle part of that little cutout, you can see our estate vineyard where I'm speaking from. Of course, you know Elton Vineyard. That's a vineyard that Dick and Betty O'Brien planted. And fortunately, Craig Smith, one on our board of directors, worked with Betty O'Brien to ink a new agreement in a relationship where we have the option of purchasing her vineyard under certain terms and conditions that allow us to make investments on her property now while she still lives there and while we're still leasing it, so that we can comfortably make those investments, knowing that we can recover the value upon her passing. And so that allows us then to move forward with our plan of putting a remarkable tasting facility next to that gorgeous O'Brien garden at Elton Vineyards. That will be coming. The work will be coming on that after we finish our facility up in the Dundee area. And so here's the image of the planting at Elton Vineyards, where you joined with us to plant Pinot Noir. This is actually on the property called Ingram, which we have purchased there as well as leased from Betty's brother, who is now passed. And that vineyard now is completely planted. And so your investment has produced one of the most remarkable contiguous plantings of Pinot Noir anywhere in the Willamette Valley. And then, of course, at Pembroke, we went off to establish in another AVA. This, of course, is the Elton is in the Eola Hills AVA, one of the most respected AVAs for Pinot Noir. We are now, of course, here you see yourselves helping us plant Cabernet Sauvignon up in the hills above the towns of Walla Walla and Milton Freewater, where we've started a brand called Pembroke. That's the vineyard name. And I think a number of you know that we also purchased land in the Rocks District, which is the only AVA in the United States that is solely defined by its soil type. In this case, not so much soil, it's cobblestones, basalt cobblestones. It's a very unusual soil that collects the heat, the radiation from the sun during the day and then re-emits it in the evening, which greatly influences the Syrah that's planted there. We're working with the city of Milton Freewater to design a winery, restaurant, and lodging to be constructed on this site. And one of our staff members is working hard to figure out how to get the city's cooperation in getting the water, city water, extended to this property. It's just outside the city limits of Milton Freewater. And you can see some very happy shareholders there that are planting those vines, giving us an opportunity to further tell the Oregon story about the remarkable grapes that are grown in the Walla Walla AVA on the Oregon side. And as you know, of course, about the Maison Bleu brand that we purchased, which will be domiciled, home-based in the Rocks District. And then, of course, our first harvest at Verno Estate Vineyards, where we are growing biodynamically, and where we're going to teach others the importance about growing in this manner, using the principles of Rudolf Steiner, who has really articulated these principles of biodynamic farming. But of course, we all know now the Hawaiians for over 900 years were using that form of those methods of farming. But anyway, this another example about how by banding together, we're able to create new experiences, different types of wines. This is in the Dundee Hills AVA, which will allow us then to fill out our portfolio so that we can tell the whole Oregon story. Now, as you know, Jan, I mentioned, is involved in building Domaine Willamette. That's the Method Champenois sparkling wine that will be located at the Verno Estate Vineyard. Domaine Willamette is the brand name that we've chosen for a big, what they call, I guess, Jim Collins in Good to Great calls, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And that is to create one of the most renowned wine sparkling brands in the world. Now, it may take us some time to do that, but we're starting well with your help. And so we will make a very small quantity of this biodynamically farmed, special vineyard designated wine from this vineyard. But the Domaine Willamette allows us to source Pinot Noir in particular from all of our vineyards here in the Willamette Valley, which would provide sufficient supply to project this brand not only across the United States, but across the world, just like the great champagne brands of France. And here's a picture where you can see the status of construction as it is today. There you can see the widening on Highway 99. We're working in cooperation with ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation. You can see that there's widening there. There will be a middle lane that'll be put in, and we'll have a turn lane into our property, the only, I think, turn lane actually on Highway 99 into a winery. And then we'll have a widening of the road so people can ease back into traffic on this site. You can see the new winery being built up there to the upper left. And then you can see the old winery, the small little winery, basically designed in the form of an old French kind of winemaker's home and winery. That's really the style that was built in. It was very common in many years ago that the French winemakers would essentially live above the winery, and that's how that building was designed. That will be converted into a retail shop, which will make it very easy for club members and shareholders and others to swing off Highway 99 on their way to the coast and pick up their wine and then head back on their way off to the coast. So we think that'll be a pretty popular stop. This next site I wanted to show you is something I actually didn't expect to have to show you and talk to you about for some time. And that is that, our production our demand for our wines has been growing rapidly. And these plans that we have are going to grow it even more rapidly. And so I didn't think we were actually going to outgrow our site here as quickly as we have. But we simply cannot make any more wine on the top of this hill. And because this winery has become so popular for consumers and for tourists, that there's now some conflicts between the trucks coming up to take care of the wine that we're bottling and all the other activities that are related to winemaking, and also the activities related to serving the public. And so 4 years ago, the board of directors, with the leadership of Christine Clare, identified this piece of property in the Dundee Hills AVA to build an expansion winery. We basically held that in reserve, thinking it may not be years until we would really need it. Well, there you see it. So you can see the location here. It's just a short distance away from Domaine Willamette, further west. It's just off of Highway 99 and Highway 18, accessed by McDougal Road. And when we're successful in obtaining the county permits to build this facility, we will begin building an expansion site that will be able to serve the company for well over 100 years. This is a 40-acre site. So we'll be able to do our grape pumice successfully. We'll be able to catch rainwater successfully. We'll be able to have a roof size that will support solar panels. There's a real advantage in this 40-acre site that allows us to grow. Plus, we'll be planting Pinot Noir there as well. You know, I wanted to just touch on a strategy that we're developing, and you know well about, and it came to us first in us watching the growth of our industry and how our industry is changing. You know our wine industry changes. In fact, you just read in the newspaper today that the single largest winery in the Pacific Northwest was just sold to a private equity company. The tobacco company that owned San Michel has sold that business. You read it just in the newspaper today. And then you've read some really troubling news, and that was that they've had loss in sales, and they've had a significant financial loss that may have prompted this sale. And of course, the pandemic has really accentuated some trends in the industry, which we, through our unique way in which we are owned and the way in which we serve the public, we've been really the beneficiaries of those changes. And what you're seeing here is one of them. You know, Rob McMillan, who's probably the best known expert in the wine industry's business side, he's a leader at Silicon Valley Bank, and he has a portfolio, I think, of like 700 wineries that are in the Silicon Valley Bank portfolio as borrowers and have financial relationships with them. So he has great insight. And what he said in the 2018 annual report on the industry was wineries are going to have to figure out a way to take their story to consumers where they live. Well, we're paying close attention to this. And so we established our prototype in Folsom, California, as a way of testing the water about how will we go about doing this in a successful way. And you can see in this picture, there are some of our owners enjoying a blending system, a unique blending system. And you see the words Natoma there. And the reason why, of course, that is that in California, for a winery to have a winery in California and sell wine in California to the public, at least 50% of the wine has to be made in California that's sold, the winery that's sold, 50% of the sales out of that outlet must be a California-made wine. And so we created the brand Natoma, named after the old vineyard that was there before it was dug up for gold. And we kind of reinvigorated that old brand. And it's also been able us to be accepted by the people in the Sacramento area, and for Willamette Valley Vineyards to be accepted because they view us as one of them, not as carpetbaggers. So it's really turned out to be a unique way of growing our business. And from these lessons, we are now launching into a program of telling our story in unique ways. Now here in this picture, you can see kind of a takeoff on that blending system. We had, for example, we've had, Brandon Shelby, who's our production manager, help design this. Kyle Gunsel, one of our owners, Kathy Shannon, one of our owners, retired here out of the company just recently, Laurel Titus. They all came up with this system for Folsom. And now David Markell, who's the director of research and development here at the winery, retired out of Hewlett Packard, another one of our owners, has designed this system. And we're actually showing this system off. It's not fully functioning yet, but this will allow consumers to taste different clones of Pinot Noir and put their own blends together while maintaining the integrity of the wine. That's one of the challenges in giving consumers taste out of a barrel, is once you pull that bung off the top of the barrel, you're exposing the wine to oxygen. And when you put that thief down into the barrel, you're now exposing that wine to whatever's on that thief. Well, in this system, this protects and maintains the wine in an enclosed environment. So the consumer has a very unique experience while preserving the integrity of the wine. I think this is the only kind blending system of its kind in the world. And David Markell, who owns a number of patents, has a pretty good idea of what he's going to do about a patent with this machine for our company. This next image is just one image to show you our strategy of taking our Oregon show on the road. Now, these vineyards and these brands that you have helped us create over the years are a great way of telling the Oregon story, whether it's Griffin Creek from Southern Oregon, whether it's Pambrin or Mason Blue from the Walla Walla region, or Matee, which is a red blend from Walla Walla. Also think about Paramee, which is from the Umpqua Valley, or Elton, which is from the Eola Hills. You know, some of these very special brands that we've created, we will be able to share and show consumers wherever we build these winery restaurants about Oregon wine. The other advantage is that we're going to be a lot closer to you, and we're going to be a lot closer to our customer. We have like 1,000 club members and owners who live within a 15-minute drive of our location we've chosen for Lake Oswego. This is a picture of basically an artist rendering of our location on the Vancouver waterfront, which will be right above the Mary Hill Winery and Bistro operation, which will have a beautiful view of the Columbia River. We've also leased a site in Happy Valley. And then we're in Bend, Oregon. We have entered into a letter of intent for the historic section of Bend. And this is just the beginning. And there's a unique couple of advantages that we have. First of all, we have owners and club members in these areas already to support the brand. The second is that we're raising capital through the sale of preferred stock, which allows us to gather up more wine enthusiasts as owners to support those local establishments. Because of the way the laws work, we're able to deliver our wines directly. So all the wine sales there at those locations, we as owners will capture the full margin of those sales rather than them being sold through the distribution system where the margins are reduced. And so those are a couple of reasons why we think that this is a very important tactic to take. Part of this has to do with advancing the value of your company, but the other part of it has to do with being defensive. You know, as you read the newspaper today, you saw what happened to this largest winery in the Pacific Northwest and the losses that they incurred this last year. You know that there's changes afoot in our wine industry. What's happening is retailers are concentrating. They're getting more powerful, and they're getting bigger. And so as a consequence, they're creating their own brands, control brands, where they capture a much larger margin. And then they put those control brands on the floor where they feature them in the retail stores. And so as a consequence, independent wineries like ourselves need to find a different way of getting to the consumer and what is likely to occur in the future. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this, is that the more loyalty, the more direct relationships we have with consumers, the more defensive our brand is, even in other forms of distribution. And if you go and talk to the people at Mary Hill Winery, they'll tell you that when they put their Mary Hill tasting room in Vancouver, Washington on the waterfront, their wholesale sales, the sales in stores and restaurants in the Portland, Vancouver area went up. And that's because consumers had more awareness of the brand and got to taste the brand along with food in this establishment. Anyway, those are just some of the things I wanted to share with you. There is for example, in the 10K, a couple places where you can learn more about our board members. I think that's on like page 52. And you can also read about all the vineyards that you own. I think it's on page 8. I recommend you read those. I've taken a lot of your time, and we've got more great information to present to you. So I'm hoping you're also preparing your questions, because I'm looking forward to answering those. But I'd like to introduce, and I've talked with her about her to you already, and that is our extraordinary winery director, Christine Clare.
Hi, thank you, Jim. I will actually get to answering one of the questions we've already received during this presentation, and that is from Carmelo. His question was about the smoke impact, thinking about the future, but also we wanted to update our owners on our experience from the 2020 vintage. And so Carol has the next image here. And just as the grapes were starting to ripen last harvest, those of us that are in Oregon knew that wildfires grew due to the unusual dry east winds we received. And these fires did burn within 20 miles of the estate vineyard, but over an hour away from our Elton vineyard. So the estate there is shown in the top left. The Elton vineyard is shown on the bottom left. And then our Burno Estate Vineyard in Dundee was over 2 hours away. That would be the top right. And then you'll see our Tualatin Estate Vineyard in the coastal range near Forest Grove on the bottom right. And as you can see in this image, these images, this collection, these were all taken on the same day, September 10th. And as you can see, the dramatic differences our vineyard sites experienced. And that is really something where we were very fortunate to have a diversity of estate vineyards for our programs. So the Willamette Valley is a very, very expansive geographic region. And given that we have 5 estate vineyards scattered throughout, it really gave us a clear advantage for fruit sourcing that season. And we were able to prioritize fruit that would go into our red wine programs to really source from those vineyards like our Tualatin Estate, where you see clear blue skies, or our Elton Vineyard, where the smoke just bypassed it to the west, and as it was coming west, it really just took a turn south. And our Burno Estate Vineyard, where the smoke was very high in the sky due to the distance it was traveling from the Cascade Range. And so the areas that were a little riskier, were more dedicated to white and rosé programs. And so that was one of the ways we were able to continue to meet the needs of our sales team and to really keep the positioning and health of the winery, was that fruit sourcing. I know a lot of you are very connected to the wine industry, and you are going to absolutely hear about other wineries that decided not to make wines from 2020, or maybe not to make red wines from 2020. And, there are a lot of considerations for that. Every winemaker knows their fruit sourcing, and they know what they're capable of doing in their winery. But there were also other considerations at play during the pandemic, where maybe a winery, due to tasting room and restaurant shutdowns, did not need to make wine to meet their business goals. So, we're in a much different situation here. So though there were growers that we weren't able to accept fruit from, because of the many wineries that were letting contracts go and not harvesting, we were actually able to help over 22 growers by purchasing $1.2 million worth of grape contracts to really aid and assist our vineyard colleagues here in the Willamette Valley and meet our fruit supply needs to make our programs like Whole Cluster that are growing really rapidly. So I hope that answers your questions about the 2020 season. On the next slide, I have great news that we just received on some of the first releases we've had and their resulting scores. So just last week, we received the great news that our the first red wine we release each year is our Whole Cluster Pinot Noir. And from the 2020 vintage, we've now received a 91-point score and Editor's Choice from Wine Enthusiast magazine. We've also received a 91-point score for our 2020 Pinot Gris, which is a new release, and that was from the Sunset Magazine International Wine Competition. And so, we really have, so much gratitude to our winemaking and vineyard team for their courage and their talent for making these high quality wines. and really putting us in the position where, we're here to share them today. There's so many accolades that the wineries received over the past year. We had to select just to highlight, as the font was getting so tiny to list them all. But other ones I do want to call out is, we have a really bright future with our Method Champenois sparkling wines. We're obviously dedicating a new winery to the production, but we received a 92-point score for the 2017 vintage. We also have our signature wine, our Estate Pinot Noir from 2019, received a 91-point score. So our wines are definitely receiving high praise from the trade and media. On the next slide, I have other exciting news that just took place here at our estate vineyard and tasting room. And this was that we were selected as the finale location for Bravo's season 18 of Top Chef. Top Chef selected Portland and Oregon in a very competitive process for their 18th season. And it was a very, very exciting call to receive last fall, that we were chosen to really be that final showcase for the competition. I think a lot of our owners were very, very surprised when we abruptly had to close for 3 days for the filming. I know we saw some of you down at the gate wondering what was going on, but it was just an opportunity we could not pass up, as this show receives around 3 million viewers each week. And the finale just aired on Thursday, July 1st. And so I think one of the things that, for those of you that tuned into the season, really got to experience was just how excellent of a job they did in showcasing the culinary destination that Oregon has become. From the Hood River Fruit Loop to the Oregon coast, doing a competition with Tillamook at the cheese factory and with Oregon Dungeness crab. It was really incredible to just be involved and have them finish in wine country. So no spoiler alerts. As for those that haven't seen it, we do want to encourage you to watch. It is available on bravotv.com and also on your on-demand services. But we're really taking, we're taking our involvement and partnering to showcase, the partnership. And so we do have some really exciting promotions with some past season winners on food and wine pairing recipes we'll be sharing with you soon. We also have an Enter to Win trip in Oregon for you to come and experience the food trails that the chefs participated in. So it's really going to be a whole year of activities and festivities about Top Chef. So on the next slide, we are also, earlier this year, our founder and CEO, Jim, was named by the Portland Business Journal as the 2021 Executive of the Year. Certainly, in a year of the uncertainty and the challenges that everyone experienced, Jim really was innovative in his approach in leading us to success, but also really caring for each other and our community. We did more charitable donations and give backs than ever before, and also the consideration he was taking to the environment. And so we're just so proud for him and this well-deserved recognition that he received. And there was a wonderful profile that was in the publication, along with a really nice virtual discussion series that you can find online. And then finally, I wanted to share how our wines have been performing in the national marketplace. So one of the reasons why we've had the success, like Jim shared, in 2020, even when the restaurants were closed, was we have this ownership, we have these loyal supporters throughout the country that are selecting our brand and supporting us. We internally refer this to our owner's army because of how strong it is. And so that's really what helped us out there in our national sales. As the channel shifted, to off-premise, in which we are very well positioned and continue as our goals to find our wines, for you to find our wines on more and more shelves and lists. So here I just want to share a couple that our whole cluster Pinot Noir continues to be a leader as the #1 Willamette Valley accoladed Pinot Noir in its price point. It grew in its depletions over 10% last year. Our whole cluster Rosé, its sister product, also is growing. It reached the #2 position in its category and grew at a rate over 40%. So we are very happy about how this relatively new offering our portfolio has done over the years. We also launched our Dijon Clone Chardonnay into national distribution, and it's already in the 4th spot. Our Pinot Gris maintained #3, our Riesling is #1, and our signature wine, our Estate Pinot Noir, #2. So we are very focused in our industry or in our performance in our industry. And so you'll see us throughout the year tell you about how these wines are doing, even ask for your help to establish these wines in new test markets. We have many owners out in New Hampshire that are helping our wines get new placements from their support. And so if you have not already joined, we have this wonderful community we've established on Facebook. It is a private group for our owners where we give you a lot of behind the scenes detail on winery happenings, also how you can help. And that's where we've been sharing where our new placements are, like our white Pinot Noir in the Midwest and Texas, and how you can find those. So I really invite you to join that page and to join in on the conversation and fun we have there. There's a lot of fun photos to see how people are enjoying our wines and celebrating. So that is all I have. I'm going to turn it to our CFO, John Ferry, for his finance report. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, and welcome everybody. Before we get started on the financial review, I would like to acknowledge and thank Michael Smoot from Moss Adams, who are independent auditors, who is here for the call as well. So we'll start the review with the commentary, and then we'll look at the numbers. So the question I get asked most is how come during a pandemic where 9.5 months of the year you had the tasting rooms closed or at 25% capacity and bars and restaurants were closed, do you hit a record year? So the record years in terms of sales and also operating income. What we found is that the wine consumer is very resilient, and they will go and find their wine and be able to buy it no matter whether those places are closed. And the key is to have a presence in each of the channels. And we're very fortunate we have a strong presence in those channels. And then we've got to go and use our resources and allocate them where the consumer is most active. So in our case, we switched our attention to phone sales and the internet. And what it led us to was an increase in 53% in our sales over the phone and a 256% increase in our internet sales over the prior year. The other item that we got a benefit from, you can go back to the last slide, please. Thank you. The other item we got a benefit from was national selling expenses. When people can't travel, the customer's not at their office. We're not able to put our team in to do demonstrations and change stores. We had lower selling expenses last year than we had the previous year. I see that as a one-time benefit. As those things open back up, we're going to go back and continue to promote the brand with our customers and in those chain stores. So what that led overall to was the 10% increase in sales. We turned it into an increase in income from operations of 34%. Other items that happened, crop yields. The crop yield last year was historically low. We had a 38% reduction from what we would normally expect as a 7-year average. Because of the growth in the business, we needed to go out and find that fruit. And while it cost us money, we were able to find it. As Christine said, the Willamette Valley is very large. Our source there was available because a lot of people had gone and cancelled contracts, and we were able to bring that in at a good price. And the thing that's really pleasing is that we've got a very talented crew in the winemaking team, and we were able to bring that in and make a very, very high quality product, which Wine Enthusiast has confirmed. Other things going on, preferred stock offering. We launched a preferred stock offering in June last year for $9.3 million, and we were able to successfully go and sell that between June and December. And when I say done it internally, that means we marketed it internally, we accepted subscriptions ourselves, we collected the cash, and then we went and informed our transfer agent where to send the shares. So that was done with our existing staff. And the final bullet point is probably the one that I'm most pleased about. Fundamental responsibility of any management team is to make sure that employees are safe. In our case, we were able to grow the business and provide a safer environment to the employees. In addition to that, we went and invested in state-of-the-art filtration systems in all of our locations. And we've done that to make sure that both our employees and our guests were going to have a safe environment. So that's the kind of background. Here are the numbers. So both sales distribution channel, for us, the majority of the stuff we do through distributors is going to be in chains. So the fact that the restaurants were closed, we more than made up for that with our sales through the likes of Costco and Safeco and the large chains. Direct sales also grew. Those grew primarily with the phone sales and internet sales growth, where we diverted our resources in terms of people and marketing and promotions to kind of go there and pick up those sales as consumers sought to buy the product. So overall, double-digit growth, and it's all organic. None of that's acquisitions, it's all done internally. The other thing you will see here on the numbers is the gross profit percentage. Above 60%, very high for the industry standard. And we did not panic. We did not go and drop the price. We did not go and do a whole bunch of extra promotions. We maintained our margins during the pandemic as well. And with the lower operating expenses, primarily on some of the lower sales costs, you end up with a significant increase in income from operations. So a 34% increase there. And at the common shareholder level, 30 cents to 46 cents, so 53% increase in the income applicable to common share. So that was last year. Big question is, so what's happening in 2021? So if you've been paying attention, you'll notice there's been a big change in the share price. The last 5 years, we've typically been around, $6 to $8. Starting in March, back end of April and going into to May, we've seen a significant increase. The share price is currently trading as of Friday at $13.71. And it's maintained that level between $13 and $14 for the last couple of months. And what it's meant is not only is the common shareholder seen a significant increase, but from a market capitalization point of view, the business has effectively doubled to just under $70 million. So Q2, the main story coming out of Q1 was distribution sales. What we'd seen was that while our distributors were seeing increased levels of sales going through to the end customer in terms of depletions, we hadn't seen those orders coming through in Q1. We ended up Q1 with 12% lower sales than we had the previous year. We expected that to turn around, and it has. So we're expecting to see when we close the first half of the year that our top line sales numbers are going to be higher than they were last year for the first half. The other thing that's happening, and it's all in the news in terms of the economy opening back up, The big thing for us is our tasting rooms. We have 5 tasting rooms, and I kind of look at that the equivalent to our investment in a fast car. We have been either parked or stuck in first and second gear all the way through the first half of this year. We are now, with the economy opening up, going to be able to take that car out for a run, and we're really looking forward to seeing how fast we can take it. So that's going to be a big change as you start seeing the numbers for the second half of the year, is what's going to happen with that runway on our tasting rooms. The other items that's happened and the announcements that Jim made and Christine as well in terms of expansion, we've currently got 5 tasting rooms. We've announced that we're going to open up 4 new winery restaurants. With that, it's not just construction costs. We're going to have to mass up the business as well. We're going to have to invest in infrastructure in terms of people, in terms of IT. And that growth with the expansion means that we're going to have to go out and look for additional capital. So that brings us to funding. So our current vehicle for funding is a preferred stock offering. As I mentioned, last year we went and successfully sold $9.3 million through the end of the year. We're going out this year. We filed a prospectus supplement in June. Our goal is to go and sell $10.7 million, probably just over $2 million in shares between now and the end of the year. And that again is going to be internally done. We're going to go and market it. We're going to go and do the subscriptions ourselves, and we're going to sell that. One of the big differences we've done on a preferred stock offering over previous offerings is our ability to match the subscribers with the business. And so we are giving preference to people that want to join a wine club or do other business programs with us, such as taking the dividend in the form of a wine credit. On the last preferred stock offering, over 85% of the people that subscribed decided to elect to take a wine credit instead of a check. That's a big deal. And we are targeting a similar number as we go into this preferred stock offering. This is not an unlimited vehicle for raising finance. We have a maximum in terms of 10 million shares that we can go and issue under this particular program. And so after this offering is done, we've probably still got somewhere between $6 and $7 million that we can raise under this vehicle going forward. In terms of the numbers, similar strategy to what we've done in the past. It's a price that goes up as the time goes up, but we're going to try and sell the whole thing out by the end of this year. It's been a very soft start, as we've normally done. You're going to see a lot more publicity in terms of offering and advertisements through July and August. So that concludes the financial update for the business. And with that, I'll hand it back to Jim.
Thank you very much, John. I don't know how many of you know a little bit about John's background, but he has been the CFO of an aircraft manufacturing company and also a president of a wood products manufacturing company here in Oregon. And his experience, not just as a CFO, but his experience in process management will be very valuable to us as we continue to grow our business and in the challenges of operating at a much larger scale we will be faced with. So that I'm very appreciative of John's work. It's been very difficult, as you can imagine, to run a finance department with all the employees distanced and kept safe, and still, meet all of the requirements of running a finance department, as well as our NASDAQ and SEC reporting requirements. It's been no small feat. The other thing I wanted to add is that we have not had one case of the virus being contracted in the workplace by an employee or by a customer. Not one case has been traced back to interaction here at the company. And so very proud of the efforts of John and all of the team in looking after our customers as well as each other. Now I have to introduce the official vote count that would be presented by our board secretary, Craig Smith.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank everybody for getting their votes in early. It saves us a lot of resources not having to go out and try and follow up. But we did get over 62.5% of you voted in time for this meeting, and so we have met quorum. In terms of the two items that were on the ballot, one was the selection of our auditors, Moss Adams. 99.8% voted yes for Moss Adams. There were two directors up for election. So, and a total vote of 1,570 people voted. Stan Terrell received 1,549,000 votes. So overwhelming majority for Stan. And I received 1,568,000. So I want to thank you all personally, because it's exciting to be involved with this company right now. The things that are going on for investment in the community, from all the sustainability things you've heard about, working with the community, including when at the height of the pandemic, when the healthcare workers were overrun, donations of cases of wine to the health facilities to ease their pain a little bit. And then, of course, the excitement of all the new things that were expanding. I had the opportunity, one of my sons lives in Davis, California, and I had the opportunity to go down there a week or so ago and spend a week with, and go to Folsom with his family. It was a great place. There's in the historic district of Folsom, the traffic is blocked off, and walking through the old town streets, little shops along the way. But it's also modern. There's a parking structure right at the end of the historic district. And our Folsom facility is in the first building coming out of that parking structure and heading into the old town district of all those little shops. We're on the second floor, and there's a great patio that overlooks an amphitheater and a plaza where a lot of things go on. And people were certainly enjoying the blending system and the tasting menu. So I guess I'd encourage anybody that gets in the Folsom area to visit there. And as these other tasting rooms open up, make sure you go there and try the restaurants and the food and the great wine tasting. So again, thank you for re-electing me to continue to be a part of that, and look forward to seeing you next year.
Craig, thank you very much. It's, and I know many of you who are on this Zoom call with us are frequent customers of our facilities whenever you get a chance. And I can't wait if we do get an opportunity to bring a winery restaurant to you in your community. I'm looking forward to that. We have a clear path for extraordinary growth in front of us, which I think helps explain why the market, once they learned the news about what we were doing, has responded very positively to the growth prospects of our common stock and our other stock. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure I got the help of Dana, because that's what I'm going to need. I'm going to need Dana's help making sure I read the questions and answer the questions that you've asked. Okay, I've clicked on the Q&A section, but it's quite a distance from me. It's about 5 feet from me. And I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to read these questions. Oh, is Christine able to see them? Okay, Christine, you want to take, she's probably got better eyes than I do. You want to take these questions and see if there's any that you and I need to answer?
Yeah, happy to. I think the first one is from Terry, and he must have been seeing the news because he's asking about how the vines did during the heat wave.
Well, actually, both Christine and I are very well versed on this because we pay very close attention to our vines. Mother Nature, really threw the Pacific Northwest for a loop when, a very wild jet stream got kind of clipped off and created a little spinning loop of that jet stream where it trapped the air over the Pacific Northwest for a period of time. And that's what created all that heat. It was 117 degrees here at the winery and the vineyard here. That's unheard of. But fortunately, Mother Nature picked the very best time of our vine growth in which to subject us to this level of heat. The vines, had received a lot of water, twice the amount of rainfall in June. And so the vines had nice, cool, moist roots in which they were resting in. The vines were very vigorous as a result of all that water. And so there was a lot of canopy cover, extraordinary amount of canopy cover, which covered the clusters. And remember, the clusters had just been formed following bloom. And so they're like these tiny little green BBs on their clusters. And so the vines, as far as we can tell, including the clusters, were unaffected by those 3 days of extraordinary heat.
Kind of in a similar question, dealing with climate change, Susan Hayes asked, what experience did we gather from our Oregon Solidarity experience that helped us through the smoke?
Christine, that's one that you can speak to so well because Christine led the effort, the Oregon Solidarity effort. And she can tell you a little bit about some of the techniques that they learned and the testing methods that really served us well when we had that scare of that east wind, unusual, like it's a 100-year event or something, that east wind that blew the smoke into the Willamette Valley.
Yeah, back in 2018, I know a lot of you know our collaboration with other Oregon winemakers when we helped growers down in the Rogue Valley that had canceled contracts due to smoke impact in the region. And one of the things we learned during that experience was really the importance of testing the grapes and micro fermentations. And that really gets us prepared in the cellar on what protocols we should use for the fermentation to make clean wines. And so that was an invaluable, a very, very valuable experience for our team to really get the confidence in working with fruit from smoke, smoke region. We have had other experience as the Rogue Valley did have fires in 2017, all the way back to 2002 with the Biscuit Fire. So we've actually had, we have members in our cellar that have worked here for over 17 years. So we have had other historical experience as well, but that one was certainly very, very helpful. Those micro fermentations really give you the best glimpse on how the wine will result. And so we did over 70 different micro ferments in 2020, really going down into individual blocks to make sure that the fruit that we were harvesting was clean and able to make the quality wines that we would put, with our name on the bottle. Next question here. There's multiple questions about this, Jim, so I think it's on everyone's mind. You spoke to it a little bit, but maybe you can mention again, when the stock on the common side increased recently, people are kind of wanting to know, any specific reason. They're certainly happy for it, but just inquiring. Who
knows, right? Why the stock market does the things it does. I think if we all knew, we'd probably benefit more than we do if we could time our investments more closely. But here's what we think. The first thing that happened the day before the stock took a leap was, and I mentioned his name to you before, a fellow named Rob McMillan, who's regarded as the national expert in the economics of the wine industry. He came out with a report from the Silicon Valley Bank saying that he believed that there was a great deal of opportunity in American wineries. And so that really, and really, he said he's changed his mind. He thought that the wine industry would be challenged, and he thought that he was seeing points of underlying strength. Well, that next day, of course, not just the stock of Willamette Valley Vineyards, but every publicly traded wine stock went up. And then what happened is, and I think some people are familiar with these logarithms that day traders use. I think what happened was those were triggered when the wine stock of Willamette Valley Vineyards went up. And so there was something like 25 million shares traded in one day. A very unusual circumstance in very small amounts. And those are basically day traders essentially betting against each other about how far they can run the stock up and then how quickly they can short it to see if they can make money, not just going up, but also coming back down. Anyway, this is a problem that's in the markets, is some of this behavior, but it only lasted, fortunately for us, for about a day. And that's what drove that stock price up, and then it settled back down. But remember, at the same time, we announced a new strategy. And it's a strategy that I think a number of people have read in the industry about. And it really has to do with the success of Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurants. Cooper's Hawk, a company started in Illinois, near Chicago in 2005, so a fairly young company. Started with one restaurant that was kind of dressed up to look like a Napa Valley tasting room, has grown to 44 restaurants, over 4,500 employees, with over 400,000 wine club members, selling out their front door 600,000 cases of wine that they make in an industrial facility in Illinois, mostly from bulk wine that's shipped in from various locations in the country. And they make, wines that are a full range of wines, and I don't think very many of them are vintage dated. But I think what Rob McMillan of Silicon Valley Bank was talking about was, hey, there's really an opportunity when you take the winery story to the communities where wine enthusiasts live. And that's what we're doing. That's the strategy that we announced. And that's frankly why we do not have the grape growing or the winemaking capacity to, we're going to have to develop that capacity as we continue to open up these winery restaurants, because we believe we potentially will have a similar kind of results that we've studied from the Cooper's Hawk Winery and Restaurant Organization. And we think we have some added strengths. We have shareholders who live in these communities. We will sell preferred stock to wine enthusiasts who live in these communities, who will frequent these establishments. We also are winemakers and wine growers. We have our own estate vineyards and a unique collection of brands that cover the entire spectrum of the wine palette, from that semi-sparkling Muscat at Tualatin for those sweet wine drinkers, the Riesling, or all the way to the dry, elegant, delicate Pinot Noirs that we make here in the Willamette Valley, or those big Cabernets we make from Southern Oregon and the Walla Walla region. So we think we've got a unique opportunity in front of us. I think the investors looking at that and reading the tea leaves a little bit. That's my guess.
Another question we had, and certainly one that a lot of people have been reading about, is with our new projects, how are we staying in budget given inflation with the cost of materials and labor?
Oh boy, yeah. Well, that's a challenge for everybody, right? Is the higher cost of construction materials, even the challenges in the supply, obtaining the materials, getting the materials to the construction site, the cost of labor. These are all costs that we are experiencing just like everybody else. And so we have to plan for that, and we have to come up with new ways of figuring out how to cover these kinds of costs and these kinds of investments. Necessity is the mother of invention. And one of the things that we realized when we were building our sparkling winery, our Method Champenoise winery up in the Dundee area, is we really needed to have a much bigger idea about what the potential for sparkling wine was in the Willamette Valley and from Oregon. And so that's why we're putting a lot more focus on really where can we go with establishing this iconic location to explain to consumers the importance of Willamette Valley grown Pinot Noir being made into sparkling wine. And so we have the Domain Willamette opportunity is really substantial. There's a great upside if we're successful with that strategy alone. But one of the things we also did was we looked at that small winery that's down on Highway 99, and we said, well, gee, how can we get more usefulness out of this building that we own? We thought, oh, well, if we turn that into a retail shop, made it very convenient for owners and club members and those wine tourists that are coming up and down Highway 99, that those who don't have the time or can get scheduled into a tour and a tasting up at the facility will be able to stop there and be able to load up their cars with wine. So that's another way that we tried to figure out how to grow the pie to deal with the costs we're facing.
I accidentally clicked answered on one. I just wanted to quickly make sure we addressed. The question was about would we have a UVC robot at each vineyard location? And, this is certainly something we're learning about, but the robots can be loaded onto a trailer and they are mobile. So though I foresee we could have many robots attending to different vineyards that we have, the great thing is that they are mobile. And we have many of our vineyards, like one of our new Jory Claim vineyards, that's very close to the estate, so they could share in the equipment. Another question we have is about, as our expansion occurs, what is the plan to maintain and increase the wine quality from the different wines? So I'd be happy to answer that. We really see this new facility as one where we have the opportunity to really create a modern, state-of-the-art facility that can meet the needs, which are very different across our wine programs. We make small lots like our vintage 46 wines with our Phil Fuller, the Oregon wine pioneer that founded Tualatin Estate, in as little as 150 cases each year. And so with increased space and footprint and the right fermentation and aging vessels that we can invest in, we really think that we'll be able to make each lot of wine the way we really feel is best for it, which right now we are more compromised in our footprint here on the hill. And so we really see it as an opportunity to increase quality across many, many programs.
Christine, on this issue, you're absolutely right. By having a modern facility that's got more space, it's safer for employees. It's much easier to take care of the wine right now it's like playing with a Rubik's Cube. You've got to every time you do something in the cellar, you've got to have another place to go.
Right.
Whereas this growth opportunity for us is actually an advantage to quality. But here's the thing that I think all of you as founders of Willamette Valley Vineyards know. Our wine quality has improved substantially since we first began. And the reason for that is because of our estate vineyards. The quality of the wine really, mostly comes from the quality of the fruit. And that is really the key. And if you look at Willamette Valley Vineyards as a company and all the vineyards that we have, we're unique in this regard. If you go to page 8, you're going to count up 1,000 acres that we own or lease that we farm ourselves. There's no other winery in Oregon like us, and very few in the world like us. And that's the key. We have an extraordinary group of people who look after these vines. And they're in some of the best places you can find in Oregon where they're growing. So
true. And certainly, one of our goals, even with our growth, is to maintain this high majority of estate grown. And so we're out there actively seeking very, very unique vineyard sites to continue planting, to make some of these programs like our sparkling wines and grow our Pinot Noirs. We have another question from Suzanne. She talked about how she's read in local articles about the wine glut in Washington and wants to know what the supply and demand looks like in Oregon.
Well, we think actually one of our biggest challenges is grape supply. because it takes time to find the right sites, to get the vines from the nursery, to get those vines in the ground and cared for over the period of time, upwards of 7 years before you get a full level crop from the vines. So we actually think that if there's anything that impedes our ability to serve the market, it will be our ability to find those vineyard sites and to grow those vines. But we're working at it. And as you know, here just to my left, you can see our new vineyard called Jory Claim. Christine Clare was responsible for negotiating the purchase of that beautiful hillside. You can see from the tasting room that she and her team are going to start planting that as soon as they get vines from the nursery. So I hope that's a way of at least addressing that issue. As far as, there will in the industry always be, in farming, there's always excesses and there's always shortages. And it has a lot to do with what Mother Nature does. And of course, then it also has to do with how fickle the market can be for wine. But, we're like a stool that has many legs. And we have a strong set of distributors in the United States and a really good national sales team led by Kimberly Lipscomb that serves those distributors and those distributors' customers very well. We have direct relationships with key retailers and restaurateurs as well. So that's a very strong leg we have. And we're very diverse. We're sold in 49 states and a number of foreign countries. So we have diverse distribution in diverse markets in our wholesale side of our business. And we're not concentrated in just one product. We make a number of different products. And in fact, all these different brands that have been developed over time give us even more safety in the diversity of the brands and their origins of which their grapes come from. We also have safety in our diversity of where our vineyards are located. So if we have a hailstorm down here, we won't have the same hailstorm located up at Forest Grove. And so our location of our vineyards gives us some security, as much as there can be security in the farming business, which has very high variability in yield from year to year.
And the last one, I say this to the end. I feel like David wants us to have a crystal ball here, Jim. He asks, how do we see operating margins trending 5 years from now? Could they be higher due to scale gains or lower given a smaller portion of direct sales?
I'm always careful about making predictions because they generally, have really very little basis in fact. You kind of encounter the facts along the way, but I can tell you a few things that will influence margins. So the first thing you have to pay attention to is your gross margin. That's what is really reflected in what it costs you to grow and make your product. And what we know is our costs are increasing. The cost of labor, for example, in caring for our vines is really going up quite substantially. And so there are other costs as well that are relate to caring for those vines. So our vineyard costs are rising. One of the ways we deal with that is by growing more fruit ourselves, where we don't have to pay the margin that you'd have to pay to another grower who needs their own margin to cover their own overhead. And we do large plantings, like the planting we have at Ingram and Elton combined is over 200 acres of vines, which helps spread the costs of our management and supervision of those plantings. So we have very large plantings. Even the one at Tualatin is about 190 acres in size. So we have some of the largest contiguous plantings of any winery in the Willamette Valley. And so that's one way we cope with those costs. So I would say that because we have had these low yields and these really high costs that we've incurred, that's going to put pressure on those gross margins. So in the near term, you're going to see our gross margins decline, likely, because of those higher costs. But what we have to do is we have to figure out how do we offset those and continue to drive operating margins and those operating profits to the company. And one of the ways to do that is to expand our sales and to do it in a way that produces the highest value. Now, in the near term, we're going to do a lot of growing. And when you grow, those costs that those growth expenses, a lot of those growth expenses, you're paying out of operating expenses. So we're going to go through places where we're going to be spending operating income to position our company and grow our company for the future. And you know what? We got to do that. The best way to run our business is to keep our eyes on the future. One of the challenges American business has in competing internationally is many American businesses are run from year-to-year results or quarter-to-quarter results. And so, and even as a small publicly held company, you should not be making investment decisions on the basis of our quarterly behavior. We're just too small. We're too affected by fluctuations in either prices or costs or sales revenue. And so I advise you, if that's the type of investing that you'd like to do, you should avoid a Willamette Valley Vineyard stock. What you really, if you're a long-term investor, those are the folks for us. Those are the people that see the future and see that we have a real clear path to the future. And we're remarkably adaptable. And we're always learning, so that even though we encounter obstacles along the way, we figure it out. We figure out a solution. And we have your help in doing that. That's another major strength we have. So that's what I would say is the best way to answer that.
Great. That wraps up our questions.
Well, hey, Christine, thank you for reading them. You know, the screen is, like I said, about probably 5 feet away, which means I would not have been able to see those questions. And I also appreciate your help. You know, we've had another successful annual shareholder meeting, our second virtual, but now with our shareholders, I can hear them walking around above my head. And so I'm looking forward to presenting a shareholders dinner tonight, which the chef DJ and the staff have put together. It's kind of styled after the International Pinot Noir Celebrations salmon bake. So that is how it's styled. So it'll be very interesting to see how our staff carries that off to give our shareholders that kind of experience. Again, I want to thank you for supporting Willamette Valley Vineyards, both with your direct purchases you make from the winery through your ambassadors, but also when you pull the wine off the shelf. You know, we do send out a notice each year encouraging you to do that, because the chain buyers make their decisions about our placements, where if we're going to receive a placement, if we're going to lose one, and where we're going to be on the shelf based upon how well we sell on those shelves. So I really appreciate how you're continuing to protect the winery, but also grow it. So thank you very much for tuning in and being a part of Willamette Valley Vineyards.